Welcome today to Decades Revisited. Our honored guests are Jim and Daisy Durkin, and he will tell you about the decades in his life.
And they're getting more and more decades all the time. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and get an opportunity to be with good friends and just talk about the good things that have happened in a long life and a good life. And I was born in Chicago, Illinois. The only thing I didn't like about that is during World War II, whenever you visited a foreign country and you tell them you were from Chicago, Illinois, they wanted to know if you were a gangster, because they thought all gangsters, everybody in Chicago was a gangster of some kind. And we would tell them, no, there's just ordinary people there. But that was back November 12th, 1925, shortly before the Depression, and born in a nice middle-class home. My grandmother and grandfather lived with us, and with my mother and father. He was a lineman in Chicago. And then an unfortunate thing happened in my life, which God would later use for better things, but didn't seem like it at the time. Over a period of by the time I was 12, my mother and my father and my grandfather and my grandmother all died. And so I was an orphan. And that's why with pictures, I don't have I don't have anything from that period at all. It's all disappeared. We were sent to live with many other foster people. And I was always a lonely guy in the sense I wanted a family. Always longed to have a family. I didn't know how to have one because my example was taken away too early, but always longed to have one. And then over the years, I want to say that we've certainly been given many wonderful people that are part of our family, natural and spiritual and so forth. Well, then after a short time with my cousin, who I went to live with after my parents died, I joined the Navy. And that was during World War II. I wanted to go off and fight a war, but I never got to fight in that war. I was picked as one of the V-12 candidates, so they sent me off to college. And I spent the rest of the war in college. One time I asked to leave, and I said, look, this war is winding down, and I want to at least have some time to be a part of it. And the chief executive officer said, well, yeah, Durkin. He said, you can leave any time you want to, but we've put about $30,000 into you, and as soon as you leave, we will put you in jail. And so I didn't want to go to jail, so I stayed then in the college and finished there. And then after I was out in Seattle, was discharged in Seattle, and kind of that lonely feeling again hit me. And we ran out of work to do. We ran out of, there was what they called a 52-20 club. And for 52 weeks, you got $20 a week, kind of a discharge thing that would keep you till you got a job. But my 52 weeks ran out, and I still didn't have a good, solid job. And then a friend of mine there said, well, I've got a cousin down in California, and he works for the Forest Service, and I bet we could get a job there. And so off we went, hitchhiking down the road. We were helped along the way a lot. Highway patrolman stopped one time, said, what are you guys doing? And we told him, and he said, hey, you don't have to sleep out tonight. So he went and took one of the highway way stations, opened it up, started a fire for us, and let us sleep there. I always remember that kindness. That was a great thing. And then ended up in Hoopa, California, and short period of time after that, I was telling people I was an atheist and didn't believe in God at all, kind of swaggering around, well, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in it. People were telling me I ought to get, quote, saved, but I told them I was an atheist. And then I had a remarkable experience. One weekend, the foreman of the Forest Service job said, Jim, he said, we called me Durkin, Durkin, will you stay here over the weekend? All of these men want to go home to their families, and you don't have a family. Would you stay here? We'll pay you overtime, and then we come back Monday. I said, okay, why not? I'd met some friends there who had been telling me about religion, about the Lord, and so forth. And that night, when I went to bed, I had a most remarkable experience. In the tent that I was sleeping, I was aware that some being walked in the tent. And the amazing thing is, I was not afraid. There was no feeling of, like, strangeness. And I just knew it was the Lord, Jesus. So I began to talk to him and tell him, you know, I've been a bad guy and I haven't lived right. And if there's anything you can do, help me. Help me to become your child. And my life was changed. That's been, what, nearly 50 years ago now. And then a short time after that, I went to a camp meeting of this little local church. I began to go to the local church at that time. And this lady came into my life. And but it was almost destroyed before we got together. What happened, I was standing in the sanctuary of this church, a little tiny Indian church, standing in the sanctuary of this church, and there was a guy there by the name of Roy Kreitzberg, a good friend of mine, but he was always doing funny jokes. So he ran up behind me and grabbed me around the neck in a chokehold like this, and I just getting out of the Navy, I fancied myself as a great judo expert. So I threw him over my shoulders, and as his feet went up, he hit the drum, knocked it over, hit 2 or 3 instruments, knocked them over, great giant noise, just as my wife walked in to meet me. The girls had told her, there's a new guy on campus, you got to meet this guy. As soon as she saw this thing happen, she says, get me out of here. That's the one guy I don't want to meet. Now, if God hadn't done a miracle, we wouldn't be sitting here today. But he really did a great thing. We finally got together and got married. And then, short time after that, people told me I had a gift for speaking, a ministry. We went into the ministry, and for 13 years, we were in the ministry. And then things went sour. And don't know what happened. Just my whole head began to change. It wasn't her fault, it was mine. And we got divorced. And we were divorced about, 3 years, yeah. And then one day I felt God speaking to me again after he began to work on my life and said, I want you to go back and reestablish covenant with the wife of your youth. And I said, well, all right, Lord, but I don't know if she wants anything to do with me or not. And called her up. Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't call her up either. I had a friend call her up, because that way if she got mad and said, tell that guy to get out of here, you know, but she didn't do that. She said, no, I'd like to talk about it. God's been talking to me too. And a few months later, we were remarried and began to build our lives again. But this time we said something different. Let's build it this time not on feelings or foolish ideas. Let's build it on the Bible. See if that won't work. And I began to read things in the Bible that were remarkable things. For instance, like it would talk, the man talking to the woman would say to her, your eyes are like this, or your ears are like this, or you're just saying beautiful things to the woman. And I said, oh man, I'm a Durkin. Durkin, we don't say things like that to people. And but little by little I said, we're going to build our lives on the Bible. I'm going to try that. One day the Lord told me, go tell my wife, I want you to go tell her you love her. And I said, Lord, she knows I love her. I give her the paycheck, don't I? I mean, that's enough, you know. But he kept after me. And finally, one day I walked through there. I knew he was hard on me to do this thing, see. And I'm telling my life story as I see it. And tell her you love her. So she was cooking some beans in the house, and I walked by, my hands in my pockets, and I said, you know, I love you. And I walked right on. And I said, I did it, Lord. And I felt him say, no, you didn't. Tell her you love her. Then I came back and I took her in my arms like a Hollywood movie star. You know, I love you, see. And that didn't work, and I finally broke down crying like a little child. And I said, I'm trying to tell you something, and I don't know how to do it. I've never done it in my life. I'm trying to tell you I love you. And she broke down. But something happened, and we crossed a line where our hearts were knit to each other, and we began to build. Short time after that, I thought because of the terrible things I'd done, divorced my wife, got messed up in so many ways, went bankrupt, just ruined life, that God could never use me at all in any real way anymore, not as a minister, certainly. You know, it takes really good guys. And opened up a real estate office. And then I began to get an idea in my mind, what would happen if I ran my business according to the principles in the book of Proverbs? Because a guy told me, he said, if you want to be successful in business, he said, read Proverbs. That's the master business book of the world. Read it, see? And I found out it's a whole lot more than that. But I read it and began to practice these principles, and in 7 years, now here's a wonderful thing, I was able to go into my wife and say to her, you and I will never have to work again as long as we live. We are now financially independent. These principles have produced this kind of prosperity.
What year was the real estate starting?
The real estate would have been started, let's see, that would have been 63. Yeah, because about 7 years. And right during that time, remember that great hippie stirring up where a lot of young people dropped out of society and they were wandering the streets and the roads, and it was actually what was called a hippie drug trail around the world, where the hippies would try to make this pilgrimage around the world, and all of the time they were using these drugs to get like a greater consciousness. It wasn't like many drug users are today. They're trying to escape. They were actually trying to find some truth. They didn't have it, but they were finding it. And Eureka was one of those places on this hippie drug trail. So here they would come through, and 5 people walked into my office one day, and they were all speaking old-time King James English, thee, thou, yea, so forth and so on. And they said, do you have a place where we can live? They said, we've already been thrown out of 3 places already. Well, now you can imagine a landlord, he hears people been thrown out of 3 places, and then they say, have you got a place? I say, no, 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 no. And I was getting ready to tell them, no, I don't have a place, but my wife and I had just bought a package of real estate at that time, and we had this old apartment house. Wasn't fixed up yet at all, but it was there, it was available and empty. The utilities were on. And I said, no, I don't have a place. And I was almost getting ready to say no. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about sending them down to another realtor I knew, because I thought that'd be a big joke to send these hippies down to him. I thought this is really going to be funny now, see, because he was an older man and, you know, a very conservative guy. And you can imagine these 5 hippies walking in and say, yea, thou that are before us, we wish to speak to thee, and so forth, you know. But it's just as I got ready to do that, come on in. Just as I got ready to do that, a thought went through my mind, and it said, if you have it in the power of your hand to do good and you don't do it, then how does the love of God dwell in you? I thought, man, you know, you can't get away with anything, see. And I told him, I said, look, I got a place. I'm not going to charge you any rent. You can move in, but anytime I don't like what I see, you have to move out. And they said, okay. They signed a big, long document that I wrote out. They moved in. And a man in my church who had just joined us, he said, Jim, do you know what you've done? He said, you've let a bunch of drug dealers in there. He said, I know the style one is a mafia man and the rest of them are all operators, selling. Man, scared me half to death. I mean, here I have a little church now. I have this real estate business. I'm getting on my feet, and now I've opened my doors up to a bunch of drug dealers. See? So 2 o'clock one morning, I woke up all nervous, and I said to my wife, honey, you feel like taking a drive? 2 in the morning, you know, good woman. She said, where? And I said, well, I want to go down to that apartment house and see what those guys are up to. And so we went down there. They were up, and I knocked on the door and went in. And, you know, just driving through the neighborhood, and thought I'd drop by and see how you're doing. 2 o'clock in the morning, of course, you know. And I said, what are you guys doing up? And they actually answered me like I was a little child. They said, well, brother, they said, the children of the night. Now, of course, that's their term for those who don't know the Lord. The children of the night are up in the night. And if we want to speak to the children of the night, we have to be up in the night. I said, oh, well, that makes sense. Stayed a while, went home, went to bed, and that was the end of it. They were pretty good people. Then they came and asked if they could come to my church. Now, that was the big test. Come to my church, you guys? No, why don't you have your church right here, and we'll have our church over here. And but I want to say they did come, and the people we had, for the most part, were really great people. They took them under their wing. They took them to their homes. They worked with them. And those people began to develop. And one day a man said to me, he said, Jim, why don't you just keep those people out the Lighthouse Ranch? They got damaged brains, and they're never any good for anything. I remember saying, mister, I don't believe God makes junk. If he saved those people, he's got a work for him to do. Well, in 1974, I got a picture of it here, show it a little bit later. In 1974, there was a big earthquake in Guatemala. And 32 of these young people came to me, not all at once, but final team. And they said, we'd like to go down to Guatemala and help rebuild for those people in that place. And I said, that's going to be a tough deal. You know, you're going to have to put a lot behind you. Well, they went, 32 people. And I said, when you're there, I said, maybe there's something bigger than just building houses. Maybe God's got a bigger plan. And today, we just came back from there a week ago, 2 weeks ago. There were over 10,000 people in the church in Guatemala City. From that original 32, now 10,000 people. They sent a church into Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador, 4,000 people. A lot of little churches all over Guatemala, some 300 and 400, some 50 and 800, out of this little. And here, when they first came to me, I didn't want to even rent to them. And here they had this potential. And so you know what that lesson has taught me? Whenever I see a person, as a matter of fact, when I come up here to the senior center, see, now I'm sitting here thinking, here's some people that think, well, I'm too old to do anything anymore because, you know, I'm retired. And I'm sitting there, I wonder if God's got something in mind for these people. See, because they're thinking, well, I could never do anything. I don't believe that. I believe whenever you're looking at people, you don't know what that person can do if they get an idea and make up their mind to do it. See? Well, from that point on, we've got some pictures here. Churches have gone to, here's our Hawaii conference here. After a while, should we just pass this around, Carl?
Yes, sir. Let
people look. This is just Daisy and I standing here. Here's our church in Germany. As a matter of fact, I'll show you the young people that went over there.
Okay.
Pass that around. I think you'll enjoy that kind of looks. You'll notice how good looking those people are in Germany. Here is here's me in the center here. And then over here is a man by the name of John Jordan. He's been to Germany as a missionary. He helped to start the church over there. And now he's working with me in Eureka in a business we have here called New Life Service.
What year is that picture, Jim?
Pardon me?
What year?
This picture would be probably, does it say? 79?
Okay.
Yeah, 1979. Okay.
Like your beard.
Yeah, you like my beard? Oh, yeah. Well, my wife didn't. He's got a beard. But when the barber shaved this beard off, my wife called up the barber and said, Jim Davis, you're the greatest barber in all the world. He got rid of that beard. The other guy on the other side is a full-blood German, by the way, a really great guy. Yeah. Now we're here in 1980 conference. I think I'll leave that aside. Here we are in Guatemala, way out in one of the wilderness parts of the country. In another one I'll show you in a moment, we were climbing here we are climbing one of the Indian tabernacles way out there. These are pyramids. And these are very old, by the way, very, very old. So we'll pass those around, let you see those. Here we are at the Leaning Tower of Pizza. Now imagine, here's the guy that thinks he's all finished because he's done wrong. But here I happen to belong to this great God who forgives and puts people back to work again. See? So here we are, our church in Italy. It's over there. Here is a picture in Guatemala. You notice the soldier right there? He's a general. He's retired now. But he taught me how to shoot a machine gun. How many of you have ever shot a machine gun? Well, he taught me how. And it's a real funny. I put that machine gun up there. And like that. Oh, see, I don't know if a preacher should be doing stuff like this or not. But I had a great time. So I just saw him in Guatemala. And he said, do you remember me? And I said, yeah, you're the guy that taught me how to shoot the machine gun. He says, yes, sir, I'm the guy. You know, I'm retired now. Has been a great deal. Another interesting event along the way, one of the men in our church in Guatemala actually became the president of the country for a period of time. And here we are at a banquet, and he and all of his friends, a number of our ministers down there and so forth. Now the point that I'm making here is this. Pardon me? The point that I'm making here is this. I was a guy, from my point of view, I was raised in the slums of Chicago. I went back there about 19 75, and I went back to where I was born, and it's all broken down places now, just terrible and a bad community. And I went there and I stepped out of the car. I guess I looked like a Chicago detective to the people that were there. And right in front of the house where I was born, still there, but just terrible, 9 South Campbell Avenue. And I got out and these guys came out and they said, "What do you want, man?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I was born in that house right there." And I said, "I just wanted to come back and see it." And they looked at me for a while and they said, "Oh, you're okay, man." And then they walked off and left me there. And from then on, I could walk around the neighborhood again. And it was like old times, you know, being in that place. Well, I came from that slum, lost my parents. Things ended up divorced from my wife. And I remember preaching a sermon just a few days ago about you're not finished because the first 20 years didn't work out. And you're not finished because the next 20 years didn't work out. You're only finished when you quit. See? And somehow God got me back up and say, start one more time. And that's what we've done all along the line. Now, here we are at, I'm almost 70. I'm not going to tell you how old my wife is. She said, "You ever tell anybody how old I am? It's all finished." No, it's not that. But here is a book called Great Moments in the Life of Jim Durkin. And I want to show you a picture to what my people do to me. For instance, they took this picture when I didn't see it. I'm going to pass this around. See? Can you see that? Yes. And the title under it is "Daisy Backed Into What?" See? And here I am in this terrible place of shock here.
It's a nice mustache.
Huh?
Nice mustache.
Oh, isn't that a great mustache? Yeah. You really are in the hair, aren't you, on the face? I can see that now. Now, here I am in a great meditative mood. You can see it, a great preacher thinking. And yet the caption they put at the end, the bottom of it is, "No, I think I'll have the Hunan pork instead." I mean, there's no respect in this world. I want to tell you that, right? Yes. And then all these wonderful sermons. I'm going to pass this along to you. Here's one. Just a minute. I think you'll like this. Here I am in a pensive mood. Just a minute. Let me turn my brain back on. So I'll pass this around here. I think you'll like that. Now, Carl, do you have any questions out of this great life that you'd like to know the answer to?
So what was the year Lighthouse Ranch started?
Oh, I forgot all about that, too. Lighthouse Ranch started in 1970. Yeah. And again, it was just an outgrowth of these massive numbers of young people came to us. In less than 3 years, over 3,000 of them joined the church. And we had to have a place to train them. And that's what the Lighthouse Ranch was all about. And we got this old Coast Guard station out there and bought the thing and brought these young. One time there was 250 people out there. And now there's only about an average of 70 or 80 at a time. But they just piled in on us. We had an idea, whosoever will may come. Well, boy, they sure did come. We didn't have the idea, whosoever will may stay. They had to behave themselves, but whosoever will may come, see. And so they piled in us all kinds of people. There were women there that had no husbands, but they had 3 or 4 children. They said, "Will you take us? You know, come on in." And just piled in all kinds. Old people, people that had been in jail, people. But today, many of those people are out doing great things. They're in business. We began to know that we had to, when all these young people were coming in, we had to make a decision. Now, I'm not opposed to welfare in any form. There's a place for it. It's necessary for some people. It's very vital for some people. And the same with the very many services we have. But these were young, healthy people. And they thought, well, they had learned to work the system, is what they call. We know how to work the system. And I said, guys and gals, you never want to work the system. You want to let God work in your life. Stand on your own 2 feet and help others. Don't be taken from others. Well, they said, well, then will you teach us how? And I said, I will. And I opened up the same book that had helped me, the book of Proverbs, began to teach those principles. And then we started creating businesses. And wasn't the first one, I think we created a cleaning service was the first one.
I think so.
Went to the houses and cleaned up people's houses and so forth. And when they would go there, they would not only clean the houses, but they would talk to people about the Lord, what they'd found and so forth. And many people started coming to church as a result of that. So the church was growing on all directions. We were having a great time doing that. Then, one day I was sitting in Denny's, and I'd been reading about something called vinyl repair, where this new plastic good that they were using would get cut, and now they could repair it. And I said, boy, I sure wish I could find out about that. And a man came in while we were sitting there having a cup of coffee, and he got to work on a seat. And I said to one of my young men who were with me, I said, I think that's that vinyl repair he's doing. Would you go ask him about that? And so he did. And he came back to me, and I said, how would a person learn that? And he said, well, I'll teach you. He said, I just fool around with it, and I'll be glad to teach you. So he taught our people how to do it. And there are people that have come out of that little learning thing, that have built businesses that are making $100,000 a year and more today out of that business. We have people in the janitorial businesses that are very, very successful. We have people in the building trades that are very successful because we taught them to not lean on the state, but to learn skills for themselves and then stand up and earn their own way in this life. And that's where we get that principle. Once again, right out of the Bible, see. So it's been the Bible really that shaped the thought processes of my own life. Now don't sit over there now smirking at those pictures. I mean, those are very serious pictures now that you're looking at there.
Didn't you all create the Tri-City Weekly too?
Well, thank you, Carl. I forgot about that. See, I'm getting to that stage in life where I forget about lots of things if I'm not reminded. Yes? We did. One of the things, see, we were looking for ways to put our people to work because the people in the community at that time weren't sure who these people really were. I mean, they didn't know whether they could be trusted or if they'd steal from you, and they'd heard they were all on drugs and they were terrible people. And a lot of them were on drugs, no question about it. But once they found the Lord, they got off the drugs. And one of the businesses we created was this newspaper, the Tri-City Advertiser, Tri-City Weekly now. And because we had a large number of people who could deliver it door to door, and a guy asked me, he said, well, you know anything about the newspaper business? No. But I said, I've got these Bible principles, and I've been in business for a number of years. I believe we can put this together. So we went up to Brookings and got a contractor there who agreed. They were in the newspaper business. They did the printing for us. And we drive up every week and get this paper and bring it back and then distribute it in the community. Several of the people that are still here went out and sold advertising for it, and we didn't even know how to break it up in column inches. So we just sold quarter pages and half pages, and but gradually we learned. You know, the next thing, this thing has become a tremendously successful media in our community here, and that's how those things were. We had a necessity that I wanted them to work. I wanted them to earn their own way. Some of them have gone on to be reporters and builders in newspapers just from the skills that they picked up there. Isn't it wonderful, the potential that's in people if you give it a chance to come out? And we just gave them a chance to come out. I remember some of them came to us, talking about the Lighthouse Ranch, that they were on drugs, and they were so damaged. I remember one in particular, he would we were growing like vegetables, and he'd take a hoe and he'd go like, boom, and then he wouldn't move. He'd just, boom, and just stand there like that. And then you say after a little bit, come on, Joe, move again. And then he'd, oh, boom. But in 6 months, you wouldn't have recognized that guy. His mind had cleared up. He was becoming a vital person again and went on to become a fine human being, see. So that's, I think Daisy might want to say something here. But if there's anything great in our lives, is the wonderful people we've had that have worked with us and the wonderful changes we've seen in people's lives because of what God did. See, we didn't go, we were only there, but we saw God change people's lives. So everything in my life, so I was telling Carl, I didn't know if he wanted my life or not, because the last 50 years has been just this one period of time in which we've been involved in stuff like this. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No. Can't think of anything.
Well, would you look at the camera and tell them that you have a handsome husband and you're glad that you...
Are you planning any 25th anniversary of the Lighthouse Ranch in 75? I mean 95 or
95, oh yes, sir.
Reunion of everybody? Or
Yeah, well, we just had a Festival of the Sun, which was the 22nd. We used to have these festivals every year.
Oh, is that right?
And then for a long time, didn't have them. And now we just had one again. And that was really great. There were people there that we hadn't seen for 20 and 25 years and so forth, and they all showed up. And they looked exactly the same, except that their hair had slidden back slightly, and a few things got a little bigger around the middle, like myself, and so forth and so on. But they were the same old people. And you're right, we'll plan that. We're getting ready for a big reunion. This will be about a year and a half away, 2 years, of the entire ministry. They'll be coming from all over the world now, from Central and South America, from Asia. I had a really great experience. About 2 years ago, a man came to me in Eureka that we had met in our ministry in Alaska. And I went up there and I taught for about 3 months to this whole group of people, including this young man. And we told them how the Lord said we should go into all the world and preach the gospel to everybody, the good news to everybody. And this young man took that literally, as I hope everyone would. But he went out, and I asked him, well, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Russia. Russia? How did you get in Russia? He said, I don't know. He said, when Russia began to come apart, you know, politically, I felt I should go there. And he went there. And now he's over 200 churches in Russia, and he's been preaching to those people. Now here, when you first met this guy, very ordinary kind of looking guy, you think, well, you know, he just... But I'm telling you, when I sit here like looking at you, I never say to myself, these are just ordinary people. You don't know who you're talking to when you look at people. What potential is in them. If the right inspiration hits them, what they're capable of doing, there is no limit to what. Here's this young guy that just looked like an ordinary hippie guy. But now he's over 200 churches in Russia. We have missionaries now over in Yugoslavia. We have people in England. We have people in Italy. We have people in Central and South America and Japan and Vietnam and China. And my wife and I are looking forward to a trip around the world to each of these places where we have our people and to go and visit them, because we don't know how much longer we got on this earth, right? Now, I'm sure not more than 100 years. But anyhow, we're going to see them and tell them how great a work they're doing. And yet, one time, these were just ordinary people that walked in the door and said, can you help me? And we said, no, I can't, but I know somebody who can. And that's God. Yeah. Aren't those wild pictures?
So I got a question, Jim.
All right, I want to hear it.
I've always wanted to ask this question.
I've been afraid of this.
For 5 years, every morning when I drove to work, I'd see you walking with your dumbbells, pumping, and talking to some people down the street. What were you talking about?
Well, I want to tell you, one time I was out doing that, and somebody called down here and said, can I get in touch with Jim? And they said, no, he's walking with his 2 dumbbells. And they said, is that Paul and Joe? Yeah, right. Yeah, I pump weights like this, right. And no, I was talking about anything that had to be talked about.
Okay.
But usually good fun things, I can tell you that. Because when I was pumping dumbbells, you're in a high. So you're just really feeling tremendous, you know. And so we're talking about that. Sometimes some pretty serious things, but mostly just having a good time. And finally, I got a bunch of them to pump dumbbells with me, and then it was quite a sight to see 4 or 5 guys walking there. Just, you know, the one thing I want to say about pumping dumbbells, though, we have never been molested by muggers. When they left us strictly alone.
Maybe someone else had a question.
Yeah. Anyone else got a question?
I was just thinking, can you sell donuts or have free
You're right
Yeah,
there.
I remember that.
Yeah, we forgot about that, yeah. Again, it's the same idea. We wanted to get out and show the people in the community that these were decent people. See, we had a kind of a public relations gap, because basically what it looked like is there was this hippie invasion, and who knows what they would do. They'd bring drugs in, and there were even rumors that I was growing marijuana out at the ranch, and one rumor was that I had harem out at the ranch. Well, I can tell you that I would never had a harem because I would have been killed immediately. Bang, 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 bang. That would have been it. And, of course, no drugs at all. I mean, nothing like that. But the reason why we created that donut thing was we met a man, and I asked him, I said, does it take long to learn how to become a baker? And he said, yes, to be a baker is long. But he said, if you would restrict it to selling like donuts and bread, he said, I could teach that to them quickly. So we sent a group of them up there, about a dozen, and he taught them how to do donuts of all kinds and bread. And then we came back and got this idea, if we made carts and took this fresh every day to people's houses, they would get to know these people, and the people would get to know them, and a lot of them got invited in for coffee, and so they would sell them donuts and then sit there and eat the donuts that they had sold. So it worked out really great. I'm glad you remember that. You remember that. That's a great thing. Yeah, it was really funny.
I'd forgotten it, but now I remember it too. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we've seen these great things. This building, by the way, it was an interesting thing. Where I own that building there on the corner of 5th and B Street, where the donuts were made, and where my real estate office was and so forth. And one day I had a real estate office across the street in a small building. I walked out of there, and there was a for sale sign on it. And I thought, man, for sale. Well, I don't have any money anyhow, so I can't do it. I'm just getting started. And the thought kept dragging at me, for sale, for sale. So I went to see the broker, and I said, you don't suppose your seller would take a no money down offer, you know, because I don't have any money. And he said, how do I know what he'll take? He said, write something up. So I wrote no money down, so much a month, so much. 3 days later, the guy came back and says, he'll sell to you for no money down, because all his thing. And we walked in that building for nothing down, and that's been the center of a lot of the ministry activity. And I just figured God gave us that building. A year later, I still didn't have a down. I was supposed to pay a down a year later. And so I went in to see him, and I said, look, if you want the building back, I'll give it to you. And he said, no. He said, you fixed it up. It's looking pretty good to me. I don't want the building back. Just pay it off. So that's been paid off many years ago. And we'll leave that to the church as their part of their inheritance. And anyhow, it's been a great fun.
Tri-City started there too, wasn't it?
Tri-City started right there, yeah.
Weren't there coffee houses? Didn't you do coffee?
There was a coffee shop there too, yeah. Free coffee house there.
Boy, that was needed.
Yeah, we use that. That building has been used for a lot of things. A lot of the young people, they live there in the apartments upstairs, and when they came in town, and so it's been used for a lot of good things. And now, I actually have an office of my own. Never hardly had an office. People keep moving in on me, see? So I never had. But now I got an office all my own, and so it's a great time.
Isn't that because you work yourself out of a job?
Well, now you're picking a big principle. See, one of the principles we have is you should always be training people to take your place and work yourself out of a job. Because if you do, you turn it over to them, and then you step back and say, now what? See, and we've seen that now what principle many times. So just recently we turned the church over here to young men and said, here, you got it now. And then I thought we were going to slow down. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what I had in mind. I had in mind coming up here to the senior center and getting to know all of you on a real deep friendship basis, and I still hope to do that, so we get to really know each other. You know, I said, man, here's some good-looking people from my point of view, and who knows what, I don't know what, you know, maybe we'll all go around the world starting churches. Huh? How would that be? Any event, I didn't get to do that, because our churches in Central and South America said, we need you, now that you've got free of that church, we need you down here. So we've been running back and forth down there, but I told them this last time, I said, look, you're almost straightened out, the problems are worked out, then I am disappearing again, I'm going back to Eureka, and I'm going to work there. So I'm still looking forward to this thing with the senior center. Now, do not be surprised if I come up with some weird idea that involves you folks. And then I'm going to present it to you and see what happens as a result of that. How would we like to start a travel agency and go around the world? How would that be? Would you like to travel around the world?
Sounds good to me.
There you are. See, well, I have these ideas, and sometimes they work out pretty good. Yeah. I didn't know you knew all those things. I didn't know you knew all those things, too. That's amazing to me.
I moved up here in 1970, and Lighthouse Ranch was just doing miracles.
Yeah, yeah. Sure has been some great things there. And then that place at Clark and B, there were some wonderful things took place there. And we had some wild times there, though. One time some guy called the police down there and said we were having a riot down there. And they came in, they said, what is going on here? Well, I said, just a wedding. These two people are getting married. And he said, well, they told us a riot. I said, well, unless marriage is a riot, that's all. So they looked a while and said, oh, well, they took off and left us alone. And then we heard one time some people were coming down and they were going to ride everybody out of town on the rail. You know, crazy rumors. And so I went down there to be there when these people came and say, please, you know, come. But nobody ever showed up. And so most of the things that happened to me have never happened at all. See, it's the, you know, funny things. Yeah. It was mentioned about our work with older people. And I have this tremendous love of older people, and I think I'm getting a greater love the older I get. So I think it has something to do, there's a connection here that I can't quite figure out here. But I just sometimes see these older people as a tremendous reservoir of wisdom and knowledge and understanding that young people could use, but they're not getting it. It's like, see, when I was a young guy, a child, my grandmother and grandfather lived with my mother and my father and myself. We were all like one family in one house. So I moved back and forth between all of them as my total family. So I was able to absorb not only the wisdom of my mother and father, but my grandfather and grandmother. And then we had a man living with us in the house who was a helper to my grandfather, because he was a brick mason and builder, and I absorbed his wisdom. So here was this growing up in this place of great knowledge. And then when they all died, I felt like I lost something. Well, you know, I feel like a lot of our young people, and this is a vision I've had, a lot of our young people are missing the wisdom that lays in the hearts and minds of older people. And if that could be imparted to them, instead of them getting into so much trouble that a lot of them get into because they make foolish judgments that they just mess up in their life. An older person could say, well, now, you know, it's like this. And if those young people were trained to listen, man, I think what a benefit it would be to the younger society if they could hear the wisdom of the older people. So that's kind of like in my mind. So that's why we go out to the old folks' homes and try to bring them into church and get them out of thinking, well, you know, I think our retirement ideas in America have been not such a good thing. It's almost like, okay, you guys are retired, now you're through, get over there and sit out at pasture and wait till you die. You know, you've done your work. I don't believe it. I don't believe there's ever a time that you can afford to throw over the wisdom that is in the minds of older people. That needs to be imparted into the lives of young people. So I want to see a way to bring this to pass. So that's my next thing. As soon as I get this thing in Central and South America straightened out, and then I want to get to work, because I got this vision. I think it's from God. And so if I start coming your way now.
I love it. Let's do that.
All right. And then, you know what I'm going to do, Carl? I talked to my wife about this, and she doesn't like it, but she's going to let me do it. I'm going to grow a beard again.
Oh, okay. That'll be the handsome day.
No. You and I can pose together. That's right. Good.
Well, thank you very much, Jim and Daisy Durkin, for sharing your wonderful life with us.
It was a great time to be here, to all of you. And thank you for coming in and kind of sitting and encouraging us a lot. You certainly did that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm thankful that Herman came, because he's my special friend.
Yes. Herman. Herman did this once. He did this life.
Oh, he's got quite a life. From sailing with my son and my wife in Alaska at a church we established up there.
Say the name of your son.
And my son's name is John. That's John.
All right.
I've got another one by the name of James, but he's not in that picture. He wasn't up there at that time. Now then, from Alaska, we're going to go all the way down to the central jungles of Guatemala. Now there we are climbing the pyramids. I think it's Tikal is what it's called, and very ancient, where Indian whole tribes have disappeared. But at one time that was a part of their worship centers and so forth and so on. Made me almost feel like climbing the pyramids of Egypt, which someday I hope to do.
I bet so. Is this Guatemala, you say?
This is Guatemala, way deep into the jungle. part of Guatemala. Certainly, the jungles are certainly different than our type of land here.
All right.
The jungle area again, and the soldier that we're with is now a retired.
Oops.
Nope.
Where'd it go?
It's right here.
Okay. Got it. He's the general.
Retired general, and he taught me how to shoot a machine gun. Not that I need to know how, but he thought that would be an enjoyable thing for a preacher to do. And so here we are in Germany, and that's in our city of Munich, close to our church there. And it's the interesting thing that these churches have taken us literally around the world. We've been to Africa, haven't come into India yet. We've got churches in Japan, Vietnam, China, Russia, Asia, Europe, and all over the United States and Central and South America.
What year do you think this is just about?
That would be maybe 1980, something like that. You can tell that's the city of Antigua in Guatemala. And it's a very ancient city. You can tell by the ruins there. And the buildings are extremely old. They're turning it more and more into a touristy kind of place now. But when we first went up there, just a very ancient city with ancient traditions and customs.
Mm-hmm.
Now here we are.
Oh, yeah. Italy.
Mm-hmm. We have a church there. Each of these, actually, these trips are not tours so much as they are going to be with the people that are there.
All right.
And then this last picture I'll show of the small. We just received an award from the county called a Self-Esteem Award for helping a number of young people over the years. Some of those young people wrote in about us, and we received this award. And they wanted a picture of me in an ordinary atmosphere. So I figured that's about as ordinary as you're going to get here.
Was that the old coffee house, you think?
It could be.
Could be, huh?
Yeah.
All right. The standing?
He's not now the president. He was.
Right.
And, okay, there you are.
Jim Durkin, thanks for letting us share your life.
Wonderful privilege.
Bye now.
Thank you, Carl.